What is a debate? Some people might think of would-be presidential candidates duking it out on national TV, a process that has long ago lost its stability. Others might think of high schoolers in suits arguing in random schools. Me personally, I think of the discussions I've had with my family over politics, had during dinner, while watching television, and especially in the car. To be honest, calling these discussions may be understating the vigor with which we express our opinions, especially when I consider the debates of my younger days. I used to say that I loved debating, but it's clear to me now that what I really loved was hearing the sound of my own voice and hearing people agree with me. But in defense of my younger self, it seems like debates nowadays are more about hearing the sounds of our own voices and making these points instead of actually finding common ground. We care more about making these arguments, winning on random ideas, than actually finding the truth of a matter. And in this world where the correct voice is the loudest, it's really difficult to bring new ideas to the table. That's especially true if you're like me, a younger voice just entering adulthood. And in this situation, it's extremely tempting to join the shouting mob and start flinging ideas at each other that we haven't taken the time to really understand. But if we as humans want to progress, we need to focus more on listening to each other and on cooperating than getting random victories. It's time to bring back the art of debate, the kind of debate that educates, that you can win without buzzwords, gotchas, and tricky tactics. Debates of these sort are incredibly important because they provide us a guide for progress. They show us what we should be striving towards. But in order to learn how to win this kind of debate, we first have to learn how to lose one. So let's take a step back. What is a debate? There's a bunch of different definitions, but my favorite is from Merriam-Webster. Debate, an intransitive verb meaning, quote, to discuss a question by considering opposing arguments, unquote. Now, you might think that the important part of this definition, the part that really defines the meat of debate, is opposing arguments. But in fact, the key word is actually considering. In order to have a real debate, you have to believe and acknowledge that your opponent's arguments have enough merit, that they're worth considering, that they're worth making a logical and thought-out attack against. Now, this is something I've actually learned from my career in high school debate. I mean, if you're in a round and your opponent says something downright absurd, you can't just go up to them and say, the judge, and say, that's a stupid argument. You have to explain what is wrong with that argument and why your side is better. I mean, at least if you want to win. However, in the real world, it's less about winning and more about understanding the other side, where they're coming from, why they believe what they believe, and what we can learn from it. Let's take a common phrase, for example, voting against their interests. It's incredibly common to the point where I've used it plenty of times when I hear about political ideas that I don't understand. And I understand why it's so easy and tempting to use. When people are acting in a way that we don't understand, it's easy to believe that they're not just wrong, they're also stupid, that they clearly can't think for themselves and understand that they're doing something that's self-destructive. But before you say someone's voting against their own interests, maybe take a moment to consider that their interests are different than yours. Let's take someone who votes for a candidate who might raise their taxes. Now, I could say this person's voting against their own interests because paying taxes is a bit of an inconvenience. But maybe this person cares more about that candidate's social policy, or their promised environmental changes, or what they're going to do for that person's public schools. Now, if those are their interests, then how can I fault them for voting for someone that would raise their taxes? When we take this more nuanced view, we understand that a lot of the conclusions we come to about people are simply because we don't have all the information. And this really brings us back to the debate between older voices and younger voices. When us youngsters hear older people talk, we think that they're not taking our circumstances into account. We feel like they don't understand us, that they're not listening. Meanwhile, older people often think that we are not acknowledging their experience, their advice. They think that we're disrespectful, or maybe we're just inexperienced. So if we have this problem, we are arguing with each other more like two ships sailing past each other in the night than actually engaging with each other. What do we do to solve it? The good news is this answer is relatively simple, but unfortunately, just because it's simple in theory doesn't mean it's going to be so easy to implement. We need to redefine what it means to have a debate, and more importantly, what it means to win a debate. Rather than focusing on getting points across, attacking your opponent's points, and leaving yours standing, we focus on finding the truth of the matter, where even if your opponent makes a point that you can't refute, that's actually a good thing because it brings you a little bit closer to finding the real truth. Now, the good thing about this kind of debate is if both people come in with this understanding, it's going to be way easier because you guys aren't going to be attacking each other and both of you can come out victorious. The bad part is that more often than not, just because you have this understanding doesn't mean your opponent will. And what that means is sometimes you're just going to have to accept the fact that they're going to think that they won and you lost. That because you conceded some of their arguments and were willing to engage with them, that you're accepting defeat, that you are just conceding that, I guess your argument is better than mine, even if that's not the case, which is why it's so essential that we learn to be okay with losing debates. This new model of debate can really help us in our relationships with people and the world as a whole. Let's look at a pretty simple example. Imagine you and your partner are going out for dinner, and you really want pizza and your partner really wants sushi, and for some reason you've decided that this is going to be your major argument of the week. I don't know, it's your life. But if we use our old model of debate, we get overly invested in what side we're on. We stake our personal emotions, our ideas of who we are as people on being on the winning side. That means if I want to get pizza, I'm going to say every single thing that's good about pizza. Forget that we actually both have the same goal of getting a good dinner and focus more on destroying my partner's arguments. So when you look at this, what's the point? Even if you succeed and you get to eat pizza, your partner's going to be kind of annoyed this whole time because you spent 30 minutes just attacking their choice. And you might not have learned something that might have changed your mind. Now, what if we use our new model of debate? Instead of going straight in for each other's throats, you can come in with the common knowledge that you guys both want to eat a good dinner. Now that you have this basis of agreement, you can focus more on figuring out with your partner, rather than against them, where would be the best place to go. So in the end, even if you really did want pizza and you ended up getting sushi, that happens because you came to a logically sound conclusion, and a conclusion based on mutual respect and understanding. Now, this probably isn't going to happen when you're arguing about dinner, but it could happen arguing with a partner, a friend, a family member over politics, over random drama, really over anything. And if you start focusing on what you have in common, what you both want to get out of the discussion, rather than where you differ, you might get a lot more out of it. Now, there's always exceptions. Sometimes people are going to refuse to engage with you. Sometimes they're going to make arguments that are morally abhorrent. And sometimes it's just going to be a really bad day when you really don't want to argue with people. And that's okay. I'm not saying that every single time you have to do these huge mind games and really acknowledge every single point that people are making. What I am saying is that more often than not, people are pretty normal. They usually want the same things that you do and just have different perspectives on how they want to get them. And when we acknowledge this fact, it's much easier to come to rational conclusions. Take our model of how the solar system works. For thousands of years, we thought everything revolves around the Earth. And when Copernicus said, hey, maybe it revolves around the sun instead, He was accused of heresy. And now we know that as scientific fact. So when we look at that, it becomes clear that just because a conclusion seems to be true, seems to be common knowledge, it does not necessarily mean that it's right. Maybe you just don't have all the information. So bringing this back to the young adult voice, to politics, to pretty much everything, we understand that if we want to communicate with people, if we want to progress as a society, it starts with us. It starts with us being okay with losing in someone else's mind, of letting our pride go a little bit. Imagine how that could look in the real world. Like, imagine if our Congress people did that. Rather than staking their victories on getting their party's legislation through, they could instead focus on the common goal of doing what's best for the American people, because that's what they're all supposed to be doing, regardless of their party affiliation. If our Congress did this, maybe we'd see less gridlock. Maybe we'd see less unprofessional animosity, because they would share this agreement, this respect of a shared duty and shared qualifications to accomplish that. So next time you're having an argument with someone and you don't know how you got there, but you just know that you want to win, take a step back. Ask yourself, what is it that I agree with this person? And how can I shift the debate to that? How can we work together rather than working against each other? And maybe when you're in a debate and you don't see a way out that leads with you being victorious, maybe accept the defeat, because just maybe an apparent loss is a victory in disguise. Thank you.